Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. The title arose to me, Where is the Future Taking Us? And I can tell you that out of all the questions my mind has fathomed throughout the years of doing these talks, this is definitely one of the greatest questions I've thought of. And it's not just it's not like something my ego, perception doesn't belong to our ego travels through it. Where is the future taking us? And in the subtitle I've written, Where is everything going? With a capital E. So where is everything going? Where is the future taking us? I am challenging myself in this episode to respond to these two questions, really. First, where is the future taking us? You see, what I've noticed about the human condition, regardless of how we explain it, what we actually have is new human beings constantly entering the system and old human beings leaving the system. When we think about where's the future taking us, we are wondering about what is after the greatest potential. What is after the greatest potential of the species? You see, for me, there's something very fascinating in this world. Excuse me. I don't know how to say it, but what it is that here I'll say it like this. Human beings are entering the system, new conscious agents. Some people look at consciousness and they're like it's an agency. Free will is a sort of, ability to move on your own, even though a lot of forces keep you. So what it is like the ability of the human mind to just try to advance itself by trying to fathom the future's future. We cannot ignore that we're creatures that are playing in a space-time continuum and measuring it through time. That's what's going on. We are not just human beings, part of a story in the world. We are an elemental, we're actually like the universe. And you know what's fascinating? This is what I realized. When a person is younger and more immature, they're thinking in individual perspectives. When a person realizes all individuals are living in a collective system, so at some point we have to care for the collective system. You see, what freedom would mean to an advanced civilization would mean trying to reach the most advanced state. You know, this might not be something nice to say, but everybody's chasing a bone. Or everybody's waiting for a bone to be thrown, right? And this is the nature of dogma. You know, there was a moment I remember, I think I was walking when I got this realization where I was no way all human consciousness, regardless of like if we understand what consciousness is or not, what consciousness is doing is behaving, and there is a sort of theatrical dimension to the world the brain projectively receives. I have wondered about the future, and I have wondered about the future trying to stay true to the traditional, let's say, metaphysicists or the ancient yogic mind, okay? And I've been like, okay, the ancient mystical thought saw pretty much body, mind, soul, let's use that trio. So I was like, okay, what is the future of my biological system? And I discovered the poetry that my body is living for my mind's continuity. So the mind's continuity is the legacy of its expression. So it's kind of like hilariously in these 100 years, my body is kind of being like the Alfred to how my mind is being the Batman. Physical existence is serving the nature of a multidimensional mind. You see, when I talk about multidimensionality, I don't mean we just cut a cake into pieces and we're like, yo, multidimensionality. I mean realizing that your consciousness is being broadcast prior to the definition of the world. You see, there's states of being that surpass how language can give us an interpretation of truth. For me, it's kind of strange, you know. It's as if like the concept of God is inconceivable, but the concept of belief is dependent on conception. So when a person says, I believe in the inconceivable, I believe in an inconceivable truth, it's another way of saying all conception is a simulation. And I think this is what's going on. Okay, really what it is I think I thought about it and I'm like, okay, it's so complex if I try to solve the global problem. First of all, I say this in these Mr.Within talks that the educational system should be reformed and the youngest children with the most creative imaginations should be given the hardest problems to solve. This is my personal view. Okay. I think about reality, I think about the nature of the world, I think about how it is held, I think about its constitution, and I think about how much of the reality is there because I'm looking at it, because there's a consciousness there to be what it perceives, or is reality there regardless of my consciousness. If I identify as a material object, first of all, it is impossible. You know, I've tried being a materialist. It's impossible. Why? Because I can close my eyes and envision, like my brain can act like a time machine and I can remember like what I ate yesterday. So what that means is every person can just check it out for themselves. We say that like the purpose of the scientific method was like pure direct experiential, you know, like observation. Like the empiricism had a sort of like royalty to it, you know. But what I'm saying is that when we actually look at what's going on, right, it's as if the scientists that have kind of like, you know, looked down on philosophers, there will come a time where philosophers are just kind of waiting for scientists to wake up, right? Because more important than thinking if reality is multidimensional or not, it is a smarter strategy to prepare for its multidimensionality. where is the future taking us? It's another way of saying, what is the destiny of time? If I was an immortal being right now, imagine like how hilarious would it be? You know, technically, subjectively, inside cyberspace, I could be an immortal being, but what I'm trying to tell the viewers is that we have all been given minds and a sort of basic intelligence to solve the problems that nature animates in front of us. I'm just a human being who is just looking at the world and being like, there's so many ways to live, you know, there's so many ways to exist. There's so many things to bring into consciousness, and there's so many things to put in the unconscious, and out of all this spectrum of all the ways that reality can manifest, let's say infinitely in a vacuum, it's like, what is the greatest poetry that can come from the middle of nowhere? You see, for me, I don't know what happened, but at some point I got bored of humanism. So my mind was like, okay, you know, I've fathomed human archetypes. If I was to wonder about a dehumanized archetype, what would I see? But at the same time that I had this curiosity, I was acquainted with a sort of inner guiding voice. Like I'm someone who, I can not just notice my thoughts, but I can notice the speed that they come. Right, so there's moments where I can notice if, like, I know my own pace and speed of thinking, but there's moments I close my eyes and a thought like lightning suddenly strikes the moment, or something suddenly speeds through, you know, speed runs through my mind, you know, like a concept. For me, dear viewers, I'm just realizing that the ultimate conclusion of knowledge is that the more knowledge you have, the bigger the problems of reality becomes. So if knowledge is understanding more about the world, and if they say knowledge is power, and so we realize it's an endless world, so the power of knowledge is endless. But why knowledge is a power is because it all comes down to wisdom, and wisdom associates to the concept of decision making. And really, regardless of what we are as a human being, like regardless of like what your biological system is, regardless of the color of your skin or whatever physical disposition you have, you are a creature of consciousness in an unknown world. And so what sort of great efforts can lead attention in the void, right? For me, I realized, like, okay, if I want to, like, if I'm alive once in this physical format, like as this sort of human being I am now, so I have to think about what is the greatest problem to solve in the world, like forgetting just personal desire, personal history, forgetting cultural enforcement and all of this, just forgetting everything and just looking at this world as if consciousness has noticed an endless expanse. And so it's as if this is where the beauty of mysticism happens, when you experience a strange sort of isolation where it's as if you are alone with all the world that is being the presence of your whole mind. This is the power of stillness. This is the power of silence. This is the power of gentleness. Because what fearlessness means is that the future cannot fail. You see the difference? It's in, believe it or not, it's like it's not just physical events that are having, you know, a sort of influence on the world. It's non-physical subjective events. You know, I have talked to so many people, and, you know, sometimes I just forget who they are, I forget who I am, and I just listen as if, what sort of sequence of language am I hearing right now? You know, what the human being is and what the beauty of communication is. and why I'm saying the destiny of the species is to advance communication. I don't know, at some point in my life I started asking myself what is the most advanced way of like state of being. And then I thought about like the most advanced state of being wouldn't be like self-conscious about advancement, you know. Can you imagine like you know, like God, like imagine this concept which is paradoxical and doesn't make sense, but imagine this idea of God's doubt. You know, if there was somebody told me, if somebody told me what's another name you can give to the archetype of the fallen angel, I'd say God's doubt. But it's an impossible idea. You know, the secret behind the stories that, you know, give subjective meaning to the objective events of our world, it's like at some point we have to ask ourselves, like every person I think deep down knows where their attention goes, their life becomes. So if your attention goes to, let's say, chaos, you will be drawn there, like as if your subconscious has anchored itself in that sort of nature. But for me, at some point I was like, what is this whole dualistic, like, you know, theatrics, and let's for a second forget that we're good and bad beings, and let's for a second wonder about what is the nature of our attention. Let's have an ontological self-engineering, reverse engineering into the self. So what I realized is that what has value? Does a concept have value for me, or does something that is enhanced through my experience? You see, it's like, believe it or not, we're just like animals sniff food, right? Like if you put a bunch of food like in front of an animal, the animal sniffs the food. Let's say a dog or a lion. Imagine people are like, no way, when Mr. Within was a kid he would feed lions, you know. You know, I would say lions, you know, at heart. But anyways, when you feed food to an animal, they smell the food and they get a sense of its if it's natural to them or not, and then they consume it. So to me, I think human beings don't have that in regards to like the sense of sniffing, but like in the sense of just inner realms, in the sense of our minds can instantly just know what is real to us and what isn't. And when something is real to us, that's when we go into an emotional context. And let me tell you, it's like what surrounds logic is the emotional. It's like, imagine these kind of like storehouses of emotion. Because people don't realize, if we think about the past, we can be logical. If we think about the present and it's objective and it has shape, it can be logical. But when it comes to the future, you see, we are like, to me, just like I remember when I was a kid, when I would enter a mosque, temple, or anywhere, like throughout my life, I've gone to different, shrines and altars. And when I've gone to these places, I've not just taken off my shoes, but I've gone in there as if I have tried to be no one. You know, it's like to kind of honor the presence of your world means you have to press pause on the inner desires that individualize you. You know? And so there comes this moment, I would say, I think this is Satchidananda, but what it is, you see, just by attention being here, existence is found to be present to consciousness. That means we may think that the psychology of the animal is conditioned through fear and joy, but in actuality, it is conditioned in accordance to the fascination of what it can become. That means from creatures that were looking at things as good and evil, suddenly good and evil will change, and it will be efficient, inefficient, and there will be multidimensional spectrums of efficient actions and inefficient actions, For me, I don't know, there's some vision, right? When I look at back in the day, there's like stories of like the gods walking on the clouds with like, you know, a sort of incredible honor, or the stories of, how would I say it, like the mythology of back in the day had great purpose. And when I think about modern times, there is no mythology, and this is why people worship celebrities. And when I say there is no mythology, that means there is no great expectation from the unknown. That's what's missing. The person thinks knowledge is truth, they accumulate knowledge, and they're like, wait a minute, why am I not happy? And then they realize, because it's an infinite game. The intellect cannot be satisfied until it overcomes infinity, which it never can. Because let me tell you, the biggest realization I have had about what true knowledge is, it is being able to notice geometry moving in space. You know, there's moments I have, like sometimes when I'm on a bus, or I'm like, you know, carrying bags from the grocery, you know, like carrying grocery bags, there's moments I just stop and I just pause. I close my eyes and I just watch my inner realms perform as if geometrical shapes are appearing out of nowhere and outlining everything in my environment, you know. So the mind has an incredible ability to interact, but the thing I realized about the mind is, because it's an extension of us and because we're living beings, so the mind is not something you suddenly, like, you know, did some yoga pose and unlocked. The mind is something that you must communicate and acknowledge that when it's living. You see, there's different people in the metaphysical tradition, and they have different relationships with spirituality, even when it comes to reading spiritual books, right? Some people are like the noobs, starting from like the bottom of the mountain, trying so hard for many years, trying to be that perfect robot of the ancient teachings, but then they're going to realize it doesn't work that way. Why? Because mysticism is not about discovering the nature of reality in a lifeless world. It's about realizing the world is alive, and realizing the life of your moment surpasses your body. This is when spirituality starts making sense. When you're wondering about the limitations of your conception, of how perception becomes concepts for you. You know, it's really a poetic topic. Where is the future taking us? Because I have attempted many times. Just these episodes have been an excuse, really. I've been like, okay, I'm going to give 10,000 talks. Might as well use these 10,000 talks as an opportunity to try to like attempt to solve problems, okay? So when I think about problems, I think there's some problems where they're based on the past, there's some problems based on the present, and there's some problems based on the future. And then I ask myself, if we somehow resolved all problems from the past and all problems in the present, we would inevitably be left to solve problems for the future. So it makes sense, whether we have solved the problems of our past or present, to start solving the problem of our future. You see, this is the weird thing about emptiness. Somebody was like, hey, consciousness, how can you use emptiness? And consciousness was like, okay, I'm going to act like an artist. I'm going to allow the meaninglessness of space to be the firewood for the, illumination of meaning. You see, it's not ritual. The era of ritual after Buddha was finished. Like after Buddha was born, or when Buddha truly, Gautama Siddhartha awakened to Buddha, he awakened when his teachings entered, let's say, the stream of consciousness of humanity. say? I feel there's a sort of poetry to the world, and this poetry to the world, it comes from where and how you meet the unknown. Okay? You know, I thought about what is it about human intelligence and what is it that we all as a human species share, right? Like, I mean, it's a very incredible question. Some people are like, why am I alive? Like, and their questioning is that far. But then the question comes like, why are 8 billion creatures on a planet that have the same shape in common? Like, our skeletal structure is our membership in the human species. Okay, and what is missing in this world right now is an honor for a future vision. And another word for this, they call this, is ethos. Okay, and what that means is it's the inspiration of a collective, but it is the contextual narrative that is inspiring the collective. So the question of where's the future taking us is like, we're like, okay, in order to answer that question, we got to see what dimensions the human being is, and based on what dimensions the human being is, right, we get to see the future of those dimensions. So I would look at my biological system, and I would say after 100 years, no more biological system, right? Or who knows, maybe immortality kind of like, you know, becomes like a sort of, you know, some sort of last minute savior, who knows, immortal technology or whatnot. But who knows, the biological body, I'm like 100 years, I got 100 years to move around as a biological entity, you know. And so what do I want to do as a biological being, not in the context of just my personal life, but in the context of a species in the void? Do you see, like, what makes someone a great thinker is how great the world they're looking at is, you know. This is why when Martin Luther King Jr., when he would give speeches, people would be like, this guy is seeing something. This guy is seeing something that is ahead, right? Ahead of its time, right? And now when I say where's the future taking us, I'm saying what is ahead of time. That means imagine being so ahead of your time that there is no time. You're ahead of the concept of time. You know, imagine they two eternal beings, you know, one of them comes and says, hey man, what time is it? And they both stare at each other and start laughing. It's like, what time is it? Anytime, man, anytime. So what I'm trying to say is what I've realized, the type of, let's say, if somebody was to give a commentary on what kind of world we're in, or this earth plane, I would say, so what is going on is that it's designed to actually be unknown. So there is no one sort of ideological system that could completely encapsulate it. So when we realize the limitation of the intellect, the intelligence is going to ask itself, okay, in what other way can I solve this mystical problem of why am I why is attention even here? You know. So they would call it, there were different types of yoga, okay? There was like Raja Yoga, which was the yoga of intellect. There was Karma Yoga, which was the yoga of work. And there was, in some sense, Jnani Yoga, which was the yoga of a unique spiritual path. I'll explain that later to viewers. And then there was Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion. So it was as if, like, imagine this world is this sort of problem that nobody has solved yet, and every being is kind of like coming here and they're trying to solve it with the first working, right? And they work hard and they're like, why isn't things working? And then they realize there's an intellectual level to it, right? And then the person goes and seeks, like, let's say, an intellectual enlightenment, and then they're like, why isn't the intellect working, right? It's as if the karma yoga, the path of work, was in some sense a type of key, and it didn't fit into the lock of the mystery of the world. So the person's like, I did something, it didn't work, you know, and then the person's like, okay, I changed my subjective approach and my perspective on reality, and still, you know, this mystery of the world isn't solved. And then this is where Bhakti Yoga comes. And Bhakti Yoga was the yoga of devotion. and devotion meant surrender. So this is what is very hilarious, because what religious ideology, or if religion was to be seen, if you were an engineer trying to see the structure of the thought of, let's say, the monotheistic religious design, it's as if you are submitting your intellect to this realization that the whole moment is moving itself. You know, to me, God is one of the most ingenious strategies to retaliate against our own existential loneliness. You know, I ask myself, like, what is valuable in this world? What is everybody living for? Everybody seems to be living for new experiences. Everybody has desires that are motivating how they live every day, and their desires are based on narratives and storylines in their mind, just like the Matrix codes, just like the codes on the screen in the movie Matrix. Like, there's stories and language and ambitions, and just kind of like many ways we exist for ourselves behind our eyes that motivate how we even accept or feel about the moment in front of our eyes. I was thinking, like, okay, so let's say somehow, sometimes my mind is playful, and I would poetically say my mind leaps, right? Just like somebody, imagine jumping from one side of a river to another side of the river, and people were like, I didn't know you could jump that far. You know, there's moments where I think about, okay, let's say right now I was inside an advanced civilization. Let's say right now this was the most advanced civilization. Everything was so advanced that human beings had never thought that it was possible to kind of surpass, you know, the concrete jungle even. You know, what's very brilliant is that we are becoming more and more a species that is becoming dependent on its own creation than nature's creation, right? And so this is the hilarious thing, that human beings, we act like natural beings, but our behavior is unnatural. So there's a huge clue. Okay, but if we were in an advanced civilization, you know, let's say two people fought and suddenly there would be like one other person be like, guys, what are you fighting for? It's like, haven't you realized how far the species expects of, like, how much the species expects of its own greatness? You see, I don't know what it is. To me, I get attracted to this idea where the greatest idea is not being dismissed too early. For me, this, like, people might not expect me to say this, but if there was a king and queen right now, like a very honest king and queen, or if I was like teleported back in the day, right? Like, here's the thing, I'll say something hilarious. Let's say in the future, like 10 years from now, they create a time machine. I get on this time machine. As this time machine is going back through history and through time, it's like, let's say somebody on that, you know, time machine thinks, you know, let's say a friend of mine thinks it's funny and pushes me out of the time machine, right? And imagine if I was to just guess like what kind of time I would be thrown in, it would probably be a medieval time where kings and queens were around. Why? Because you see, it was the ultimate archetype for the outer human realm, for the outer human being. You see what it is? The king wasn't a king. The king wasn't some dude sitting on a chair. The king was the idea that a human being could become the whole kingdom. You see, not a sort of, Louis XIV madness where he says, I am the state. Like some people were like, how do you want us to run your government, Louis? And Louis was like, I am the state. Get out of here, guys. I don't know, but for me, it's when it comes to the future, I realize that's why my mind is here. If somebody says, Mr. Within, what is the purpose of the body? I would say the purpose of the body is to move something around. and then that becomes your mind. And so then the person's like, okay, what's the purpose of my mind? And then this is where, if you don't know conceptually, you go to the context. This is what they don't teach. In any situation, we can zoom in on the conceptual value, or we could zoom into the contextual value. What it is that I feel is that it's the sacredness of evolutionary opportunity. You could be a secular person, not believing in God, that's totally fine, but believe in novelty. And what novelty means is that it's like the species has an opportunity to advance itself. And what we need is that right now we're in the kind of like everybody's playing around on the internet, but I'm waiting to see like if this whole podcasting situation online was like just accelerated, it would lead to massive information networks. Right, and so it's like, think of it this way, we're getting the bad news first before the good news. And the bad news of, let's say, cyberspace is in some sense a lot of garbage is being posted on it. When I say a lot of garbage, I mean it's kind of like a wasteland right now where everybody's just, presenting whatever, throwing whatever into that wasteland. But what I am seeing is that suddenly there comes within our species a shift in how we value the archetype of the human being, right? When I look at human beings, I ask myself, is this person living based on the past, based on the present, or based on the future? When I look at someone who's religious, I'm like, this dude's living based on the values from the past. That means he's not willing to discover new values in the present. He's not willing to add to the archive of human evolution. What it is we are facing an unknown world. And to me, I don't know if I would say I was scared of this, but it's as if since childhood I was comfortable with my consciousness, even though I didn't know who I was, to be honest. Even right now, I'm giving this talk, like subjectively, I know, I can tell you the exact story of my life, but when I think about who is actually here, I am like, okay, is it a force? What is the intent? What is the motive? Why can my brain notice the geometry of the realm change, and what sort of value does observing a changing world rhythmically by being conscious and unconscious experientially through the singular existence, what sort of value would that have? Sorry for the long intermission, guys. There's some interruptions from this side. But anyways, to continue. When I wonder about this question, where is the future taking us? I realize the question is saying, like, what sort of human future would the human being perceive to then authorize its actions towards? You see, to me, there's great dimensions of thinking that haven't even been tapped into. One thing I think the future generations will be fascinated by was how I was using this method of spirals of, like, imagine infinite spirals of angles of looking at the same moment. You see, we're living in a world where subjectively we have the freedom of an infinite being. We are a creature that dreams, wakes up, and remembers its dream. Just take that in. We are a being that is, its decisions and behaviors are influenced by inner and outer environment. And the outer realms, the specialists of the outer realms have ignored the inner realms too long. There is no greater idea than the greatest idea being the greatness of all ideas. I don't know what it is. I don't know, like, if sometimes I think about if I was in a parallel universe of Earth. If I was in a parallel universe where the concept of God didn't exist, at some point people would wonder what would be a sort of, ultimate, like what would be the universal rendition of the human archetype. Many scholars have interpreted the Bhagavad Gita, but the basic conclusion of it is that once you receive the insight that the world is a way bigger, multidimensional and interdimensional place, you honor the visions of your mind, the journey from, let's say, your sincere core. All human beings are not just given a biological system. They're given a biological system that is like a noble servant, like an honorable soldier waiting for the honorable commands of the mind. Your mind is the commanding officer of this army that is the soldiers. But the commanding officer is following the instructions of who? The general. Who is the general? The general is the idea of the soul. And why is the general even here? Why is the individual general here? Because the kingdom is at siege and the king has requested it. When you fight with honor, you fight with greatness. You see, it's a resonance. There's been many moments in my life where I've wondered, how will the ending, how will this world say goodbye to me? And you know what it is? I find it hilarious, right? I feel like, sure, there is this fear of death, but at the same time, every night we go to sleep, deep sleep, no sense of ego, persona having problems, or joys, no heaven or hell. It's like in deep sleep, no psychological state. Then we wake up and it's like we've logged back into our psychological, comprehension of our objectivity. You know what it is? Honestly, I think a really cool metaphor for the human species is that we're all prospectors and we are prospecting, we're looking for the original Earth. I should probably write a story about this. The original Earth means in a world where there are infinite possibilities. Which possibility? It's as if there's infinite beings in an infinite world, and these infinite beings in this infinite world are like, what do we do with this infinite continuity? And they're like, either we're static or either we're dynamic. I've written this sentence, I just opened up my notes, it was there, I'll just read it for the viewers. It says, "Oh, advanced humanity. The cosmos awaits your great performance, the dance of all worlds into the greatest moment. A world so advanced it could never fail." And I'll write here, Civilization 2.0 awaits. People are going to be like, Mr.Within, what Civilization 2.0? And whoever's listening, Civilization 2.0 is the movement I'm starting. It's like if it's the next chapter of these Mr.Within talks. I want to see a strategy implemented on this planet where it's win-win for 8 billion creatures. Win-win for the universal sector. I want the human species to have such an advanced vision to wonder about why is consciousness here, to discover its potential. To see how far its eyes can go and how truth can in some sense, pierce the sky with a blink, with a blink of an eye. My personal vision and conclusion in these talks I've given, if somebody's like, okay, Mr. Within just said, where do you think the future of the future is? I think it's after 3,600 years, either it's going to be a sort of immortal, infinite copy pasting of the biological human behavior all over the cosmos, or we're going to surpass shapehood and creaturehood. We're going to be like, oh, we did live as an objective being, oh, we did live as a subjective being, and now what is left? And one stands in the presence of their own unknown mind, as if regardless of how many lifetimes their eyes have opened and closed, the secret was within. The curiosity of the mind is the wonder of the soul. It's as if like sometimes it's the greatest problem the mind is trying to solve, the soul is like in the back and in the other side being the greatest answer. There were moments where I don't know, like I would say, this might be hilarious to say, but kind of like I've had these existential philosophical panic attacks. And there's been moments where suddenly my mind convinced me that I have failed. And in that moment, I just looked at the world and I'm like, if I have failed, why is my attention here? Because for me, the mystery of life is not just how my body returns, like it's like the periodic table I've rented out, I gotta give back to the earth. It's not just that. But it's just that what was the vision and inspiration for there to be a conscious entity? You see, it's like it's not enough just the existential circumstance, the appearance, but we're wondering why is it there? But when it comes to wondering why are we here, it's like philosophy becomes a mirror for questioning how attention is holding subjectivity as its objective. Like there's sort of linking. So what that means is like it's like a person trying to remember before they were a subject, like that moment where they were a child who hadn't learned language yet, and then a man trying to remember a moment before an object. That memory is very strange because the moment you try to remember beyond your objective self, you're actually reaching a point where the context of the world changes. So the permission of a concept is bound to its context. You know, like we should probably create a new word for this. So let's say we have the concept of truth, and if we wanted to have a context to truth, we'd call it automata. Okay. So there is truth, and then there's truth automata. I think that's a cool word to say, you know. So truth automata is the ultimate conclusion of the concept, which is the context of it. You see, it's the initial permission your mind gives, you know. Sometimes I ask myself, like, why is anything here? And let's say everything just goes into the future. Let's say I had the privilege to watch like a fast forwarded film where everything went to the next 10,000 years. And, you know, I would just see in some sense so many things that were inconceivable at the time of my lifetime. But it's as if those who have faith in the potential of something, they get to see. See, it's the nature of faith in cause, but is the faith in the causal position conditional or is it unconditional? Monotheistic religion says it's unconditional. The concept of samadhi in yoga says it's unconditional. So the question comes, like, what is it? Are we here to be ourselves? Are we here to be like others? Are we here to be like the world? You know, all those people who go to states of oneness, it's as if what? You're getting possessed by the whole world? You know, it's like relax. I'm not trying to denounce, like, I'm not trying to say oneness is wrong. What I'm trying to tell people is that when you come to the approach or the view of just being like, okay, I want to plant a flag for how reality, subjective reality, is objectively real. So I start off with a state being such a simple mind and effortlessness, where I first look at how the world moves. Then I wonder about how the world is moving me before I move. Then I wonder how the world moves me after I've moved. Then I wonder how I am moving the world as I am moving. So you see, from the beginning of the day that I wake up, it's like this energy. It's like this, every day is like a candle, right? And it's like, what do we do with the light of the candle? And I'm asking myself, what is going to happen for the species? You know, it's like, what's a more fascinating idea than your future? Is the future of everyone. And the future of everything. Like, imagine if somebody says, like, you know, I predict the shape of the cosmos as a sphere, ultimately, and people would be like, that's a prediction we could never know. Like, we can never know if it's true. Anyways, my humor, you know, scared off the viewers. All right, let me focus here and see what I can say. Where is everything going? And this is both these questions are dependent on what it's asking them. So when it comes to, let's say, basics of psychology, for me, I'm not saying you need to be a psychologist. For me, I'm not a psychologist personally. It's too soon for me to be like a branded cow, But so my humor's, I forget my humor, guys. Anyways, jokes aside, it's a question about reality. So people have different approaches. I'm one human, 1 out of 8 billion, and so this is how I'm trying to solve the problem. Okay. First thing I say, if I think the problem is impossible to solve, that's so stupid, because what's the point of considering the concept of a problem? So problems are designed to be solved, and it's way better to see them as unsolvable. Like the problem, there's a reason the geometry is there. So any problem, for me, I think of my mind is, it's like, if there was a spirit to design, I think it's like, chosen to assist me. But pretty much what I'm trying to say is, any problem put in front of me, I look at its geometry. Now, when the problem comes to how is the human being, or what is going on in this world, so I have to look at myself. But what's very fascinating is, when I look at myself, I notice that there's an inner realm. Certain people called it qualia. I don't, it's not a bad word, but the inner realms is, I think, a way more fascinating way to approach the mind. So I think in the future, everybody's going to be saying my inner realms and my outer realms and my inner realms. Like, that's going to be very typical. Like, if people can say that, if everybody's using that, I have succeeded. That would be a weird moment where subscribers of this channel should celebrate. But anyways, back to this, right? So I'm like, okay, I look at the human being, and I notice that I have access to my, let's say, inner space. And in front of my eyes, I have access to my outer space. Now, somehow evolutionary circumstance has privileged us with an ability to close our eyes. So in any moment, if we want to see what's going on with our mind, we just have to close our eyes and be still and just notice what's moving. So many people who meditate, they're like, man, I have too many thoughts, I'm not meditating right. And this foolish meditation teachers are like, yo, you're meditating wrong, you shouldn't have any thoughts. That's the most foolish thing to say. Meditation is something where you are just like, stop calling it meditation. You have one lifetime to sit down and watch your mind like a cinema. As if like there's a film playing that is your mind and imagination, and you haven't cared to watch it because you've been moving simultaneously as an object while a subjective inner subconscious event is going on. So when you look at the nature of the mind, this is very fascinating, because the archetype you embody suggests your karma. So this is the fascinating thing, where I was trying to be like, okay, mystical truth, where are you leading me? And you know what I realized about the ultimate mystical truth? Every system that ends up being judged dualistically has an opportunity to start from nowhere. Some people are scared by emptiness. Others are like, yo, there's so much room to build stuff. So where is the future taking us? I'm thinking, imagine, like, one way of fathoming this to like make the title make sense is like, imagine your future self came back, and your future self was like, follow me, and you're like, why? And the person's like, I'm your future self, just, you know. So imagine your future self came to guide your future. So where's the future taking us? Now for me, I could think of future self personified. I could think of the future being the greatest idea. So activation of the greatest vision. To me, it's like a distant event in the future, which every generation is trying to obtain that standard, right? The idea is that we humble each other by honestly being as advanced as our intelligence is providing us. To me, I termed it the advancement principle. Pretty much it means you live a life where in every moment you wonder about the advanced possibility of it. Alright guys, quick intermission, couple minutes, I'll be back. Okay. Excuse me to continue. Too many interruptions tonight. Okay, to continue. You see, I feel there's an existential capability. I keep repeating this. Because this is where I think it's come to. I think about what is my expectation on the existential event. I see a disorganized human species. I expect an organized one. I wonder about what sort of spectrum of organization will the human species have. I will see not a sort of dictatorship, not a sort of artificial, blind utopia. But I thought, what if there was suddenly something that was so advanced that all the nations on the planet were like, whoa, did somebody say advanced civilization? Whoa, whoa, whoa. And on the streets, everybody says, where's the advanced civilization? Where's civilization 2.0? Find Mr. Within. Imagine these are graffitied on walls or something. Like, I don't know. In some possible future. You see, this is what happens. When we were individual in the jungle, the karma was individual. But when we are living as civilized creatures in a collective system, the karma is going to be collective. What the internet has done is that it has interweaved our karma. And you know what people call love? To me, I was like, it's like two beings trying to be one being. Like two moments trying to be one moment. Such a bizarre idea, you know, just like we have, like, when you look at a cell, like the earliest cell, it's one cell, then it becomes two cells, then the 3, 4, and like that. You know, sometimes I look at the human being and I'm like, what if the human being fell in love with like multiple moments? Like what sort of cell, what sort of complexity would that moment of mind have? You see, what it is everybody has a value system, and then they have to ask themselves to what sort of structure, subjective structure, is their value system abiding by. People have different abilities and different cultivations, you know. You know, somehow a part of me feels like, what if the world, you know, there's this ancient saying that would say there's no accidents. From the context of a transcendental universe, sages back in the day would say there are no accidents. And so if you for a second consider that, that means there are no accidents, means there is no heaven or hell. That means those who don't believe that truth is here are judged by the simulations of it. In the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, this ancient Vedic book, you know, there's a statement which it was one of the most fascinating statements I've ever said. It says, this is from the Patanjali Sutras, and it's the sentence says, this world is a shadow of the ultimate reality. And I was like, no way, we are in the shadow of universal potential. You know what it is? It's like on one side of the coin, nothing has happened. On the other side of the coin, everything has happened. Imagine an extraterrestrial in the future lands on Earth and, you know, shakes hands with the leaders of humanity. And as it shakes hands with the leaders of humanity, it asks the question, what's that on your wrist? You know, and imagine, you know, the leaders of humanity look at the extraterrestrial and they're like, what's on my wrist? And the leader of humanity looks and it's its watch, and it says, it's my watch. And the extraterrestrial says, why are you wearing a watch? And imagine the leader of humanity says, to tell time, man. You know, to record how historic this moment is that you've arrived. And imagine the extraterrestrial says, what is this idea of time you have? And imagine that the leaders of humanity are shocked that this extraterrestrial doesn't have a sense of time. But imagine it's way more advanced and enlightened than us. And so imagine we bring our greatest philosophers, you know. And sorry guys, I think somebody's knocking on the door. No, I'm joking. Imagine in that hypothetical situation, they bring a great philosopher, and the great philosopher says to the extraterrestrial, We are creatures that use time to subjectively keep reality, to create a subjective version of reality that is real. To compartmentalize our memory, and how every day a singular existential entity is actually recording the moment through unconscious and conscious rhythms. And imagine the extraterrestrial tells us, wait a minute, so you guys experience deep sleep, which is a timeless state, and yet you wake up and still, act in accordance to the subjective constraints of time. And imagine at that moment the leader of humanity takes his watch and he gives it to the extraterrestrial and says, welcome to Earth, buddy. To me, life is just systems. You could look at it like an onion. It's just systems intertwined, interweaved with systems. Just so many things happening on their own, with their own motive. Where I'm like, what's moving 8 billion creatures on a rock? And I'm like, no way, 100% the brain is acting like an antenna. And every time we wake up in the day, based on what comes into the scope of this antenna, we interact with reality. Imagine realizing, or imagine the future generations will laugh because they will realize how advanced the mind is and how little we realized we could use that advancement. To me, I was like, in an advanced civilization, children will be born, and imagine the children says, am I good, am I bad? And the parent just looks at the child and says, it's like it doesn't matter how good and bad you are if the world you're in is like bad. Right? So the idea is that even if an individual achieves the most advanced state, if the world is not advanced, what advanced state? To me, I think in the future generation, in the future, I'm going to be way more focused. I feel like, anyways, I'm not going to say too much, but in the future, I'm way more focused on researching on what's the most advanced states of mind. Just like we have outer technologies, there's inner technologies that aren't discovered. Honestly, when I say where everything is going, if it's in accordance to my personal dimension, pretty much I'm like, okay, what if there's a dimension to my intelligence and sight that is beyond my biological body, and once my biological body, that sort of sight remains? What if our eyes were free before they could be judged? What if nature has a quality within it? Sometimes to me the religious ideology is very complicated to interpret because it's based in a transcendental narrative, which means you can't interpret it from one dimension, but Okay, to continue. People are like, Mr. Within, what's with these long intermissions? And I'll be like, a man has to meditate. I'm joking. But at least a person can cultivate patience. I gotta end this episode off. I'm trying to think what to say. Where's the future taking us? It depends on who we are, how we see it, what value it has for us. To me, there were moments where I thought I had figured everything out, and then I realized, just like Jon Snow in Game of Thrones, it's like, nothing, Jon Snow. And then there came a moment where I realized there's problems our species hasn't solved. And the more emotional our species is, the more it is fascinated and occupied by its inner dimensions. The more, like, you see, the issue with being a human being is we're reaching an era in history where technology is going to do a lot of the things that we do as humans. So when that moment comes, we're going to be like, wait a minute. If technology can cook food better than me, then I'm going to stop cooking. Imagine if automated cars can drive me, I'm going to stop driving. And all those components to behaviors that were guided by human intelligence, what moves them becomes replaced by artificial intelligence. So when that moment happens, human beings are going to be like, what's the point, right? And that's when really I think there's going to come a shift where we're going to be like, okay, a new era of philosophers is required to come and help us contextualize. And really, when I think about what's going to happen with the media sector, something beautiful is going to happen. People don't realize. And celebrities right now, if they had a time machine, they would agree with me that right now people are just reacting emotionally to the content that they see. But there will come a time where people want the world to expand. So what that means is that the artificial marketing and what is, let's say, low quality, just like we have low resolution of a video and high resolution. So it's like the low resolution is dishonesty. The high resolution of marketing is an era of honest marketing. I feel that's gonna be the outcome. You see, it's like the people are like, imagine marketing teams of companies all around the world. They're like, man, how do we sell our products to people? And people are like, yo, bring somebody from Harvard, bring somebody from that school, not realizing that people need to trust the moment in order to commit to the moment. Direct honesty is very, it's as if I don't know how to say it, but there's this way that the mind can move, that once it's content with all physical phenomena, not just its body, not just its world, not just everything that it sees with its biological eyes, but when it's content with the nature of all objective phenomena, then it can close its eyes and will wonder about its subjective phenomena. And when you wonder about the subjective phenomena, you realize why Carl Jung called the personality, the persona, a mask. Why? Because the inner realms, if we are unconscious to it, the thoughts come and go and we think we are the thoughts. But when you actually, from stillness and silence, watch how your mind moves, you notice that there's something watching the thoughts coming and going. So if you think in one moment you're a bad person, that's just the thought that was passing by where your consciousness, like an archer, just shot the arrow towards. So what it is about realizing the nature of the mind. It's realizing there's a question mark behind our eyes, not just at the edge of the outer line. Where's the future taking us? There's this, let me read this quote for the viewers. This quote is like from Tibetan Buddhism. And there was a time where I think in 2013 I broke the Guinness World Record of being the most, Tibetan Buddhist Persian guy on the planet. I was dressed like a Persian guy, but with you know, with Tibetan Buddhist beads. Anyways, I don't know. Just try to fathom a Tibetan Buddhist Persian guy. This is from I think 2013 to maybe it went to 14, and then 15, 16. I stopped wearing the Tibetan beads, or maybe before that. I think before 2015. So, anyways, back to this. I think about what is the future. If there is a future, my mind is what sees it. So consciousness is required before future is experienced. Now, the idea of the future is starting from a moment where there's this existential biological systems that all right, creature, you've survived physically enough for a reason. Now you get to choose that reason. Right? So then the physiological experience is motivating the moment, and the physiological experience of the moment, the hilarious thing is the mystical notion, I would say, is it's like the more unconscious you are, the less you want to see, the more you want to feel. But the more conscious you are, you want to see, then feel. You see the difference? And human minds are conditioned differently. For example, right? People are different, and different events in life even change our state of mind, imagine somebody, says, imagine who are you? And the person's like, yo, man, I'm just this brain, which is this biochemical jar where lightning storms inside it become my personality when I talk to you. And I'm technically the periodic part of the periodic table that is separated from the rest and is subjectively existing in front of the other person. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm trying to tell the viewers there's more dimensions to us than just physical creatures who are afraid of death. For me, I'm not saying death is not something to play around or be foolish with, but I'm saying that there's many ways to look at the world. So the question comes that it's not about one way of looking at the world. So I appreciate oneness, but to me, I feel there's another reason we're here, right? For me, one personal philosophical question for me was am I a solid? Why am I not a solipsist? Why am I the god of the world? And I'm why can't I raise my hand and skyscrapers rise in the air so I could see what a sky city looked like, right? Why isn't that possible? Right? Why is that an imaginative act? There's a reason that the unknown will be the ultimate conclusion of the intuition. And when we realize we're the unknown, it stops from something that's being ignorant of poetically divinity, or being trying to fight the logos or resist the logos or anything like that. It becomes a moment where you realize, wait a minute, my mind is an intelligent activity, so anything it perceives, it has the capability of imbuing the same level of intelligence. But if this mind tries to fathom the context, the ultimate context, which is the whole world, and to fathom the intelligence of the world would mean that there's an unknown way that intelligence is happening beyond how our mind is knowing it. So when that moment comes, a person realizes, all right, so this is what Mr.Within was saying about the unknown self. Maybe people will say that to themselves one day, right? Because what it is responsibility for how the environment where we are extracting our meaning from is incomplete. Like to me, I'm very fascinated that the most let's say sophisticated minds of modern times have managed to fathom and have managed to conceive the term unobservable universe. They could see how the universe has an unobservable side, right? But they can't see how the self has an unobservable side. And that's the unknown self. That's the idea of the soul, that component to how attention is present instantaneously as attention and energy are being. It's as if, like, how can I tell you? Life is beyond stories, but what else can you say? I am waiting to be inspired by the advanced humanity. I think children in the future want to be in a world, and the world is so advanced that it's like, what it means is that our progress, the ratio of our it's like think of it this way. Imagine civilization's rise and fall is based on the efficient and inefficient decisions they make, and imagine this was a scale, a sort of ratio. So imagine right now in 2022 the species has made 80%, imagine, inefficient decisions. Like out of 80% of human beings are living inefficiently, and let's say 20% of human beings are living efficiently. Now, I'm saying in an advanced civilization, it would be greater than 50% efficiency. So what it would mean, it would be, imagine it was the other way, where it was 80% efficient decisions and 20% inefficient decisions. Those 20% inefficient decisions that inside the advanced civilization would mean nothing. That means there is more victories than defeats. That's what an advanced civilization means. It doesn't mean that Earth is paradise, but it means that the mind that came from paradise could build paradise on Earth. That we are the greatest invention of any sort of intelligence that watches us as a breathing universe. Because people don't understand what the world is the world is not a physical thing. The world is not a location. The world is a concept, and it is the effect to the response of how, from certain mythological contexts, especially in Greek culture, the world was chaos and its order came, right? Or that means order was secondary and chaos was the original. But chaos wasn't any personality. It was way more chaotic than that. That means the savageness of anarchy is the sudden fall into dehumanization and forgetting disability. For me, sometimes I think about, like, let's say if I, went to the bank account and looked at it and I was like, is that the infinity symbol? Whoa. I've written this in my sci-fi novel. I've written something like this. And so I think about if I was there, like, let's say, I don't know, if I had billions, trillions, I would instantly, as a strategy, try to build recharge stations for human beings all over the planet. Recharge stations for minds and bodies. You see, it's literally, we gotta treat the world as if, like, the government has to act like a travel agency. And so every conscious entity in the civilization or in the system, governing system, is in some sense a traveler. And so what is their experience? And I'm expecting, like, beyond, not just like 6-star, 7-star. I'm expecting, like, as 4 stars as possible of a service. You know what I'm saying? I'm pretty much this guy in history who's saying civilization is going to get bored of its inefficiency. It's going to realize what civilization was a conclusion about order. It was an acceptance of structure, right, in the chaos. So the point of our free will is not to just chaotically, emotionally, unconsciously roam, even though in certain creative states of mind that's required. But I'm saying, in, like, consciously, our attention is piloting through the space-time continuum, and our mind has an ability to skip it dimension. So to see a future is you giving your mind a dimension, right? Splitting the moment into past, present, future. That's what time does. There's a quote, I don't know, I think it's ascribed to Einstein, but I don't know. The quote says, we created time so everything doesn't happen at once. So what that means is we created a system so the world isn't just meaningless all the time. So we created our own meaning. So we are living like what human knowledge is we're living in the flames of the great investigations of those great minds who came before us, right? And this is why I'm saying, like, the sense of honor, the educational system has kind of sold its soul to the economy right now. What if the educational system realizes, if it considers it, you know what it is? The educational system is like, imagine there's two kids in a classroom. One of them has an incredible potential, but he's friends with a person who doesn't have potential. And so the person who has potential, imagine, is friends subjectively with the person who doesn't have potential. So the teacher is in some sense being like, when will the potential be activated? You know, ultimately, if I could give a metaphor to what it feels like to be a living being with a conscious timeline, historic context to civilization, it's literally like we're all on. This might sound hilarious, but because I'm in Canada and it's cold, like, it's a good metaphor maybe. We're on this mountain and every person is on a sled, and every generation of a human being, before they die, they just want to push as many people so they enjoy the ride further. So, you know, it's kind of like that scene in this Japanese comic made into a show called Shingeki no Kyojin, where there's this scene where this commander knows everybody's going to die, and so this commander goes and honestly says, we're going in this kind of all-out mission, you know, to charge against the enemy and create an opportunity for one of our elite soldiers to, like, kill the main bad guy. And so one of the soldiers is like, are you saying we're going to die? And the commander looks at him and says, yes. Right? And then the soldier's like freaking out and says something, I don't remember if this is the accurate lines, but he says something in the lines of, so are you saying it was all meaningless? There's no meaning, there's no purpose to this? And then the commander says, in some sense, I don't know what he says. He says no, I think. And he says no, and he says the purpose of life. He says we're all going to die, yes, but the purpose of life is living for those who will discover that purpose one day. You see, so it's like, if we can't attain greatness, we live for the greatness of the species. If this conclusion is ingrained in the psyche of every human being, they're going to notice that a new spirit of advancement will guide them. So what the future is how much we cared for that which hasn't happened yet. So anyways, where is everything going? The hilarious thing is that everything is going to itself. That means it's like saying, like, when somebody dances, where did their body go? It moved from where it was before, but it's still itself, right? And I think when it comes to the notion of truth, which is one of the most profoundest ideas man's mind has, you know, interacted with, to me, truth intentionally is a notion of the unreachable. You see, a human being has to wonder, like, to me, I thought it was always fascinating. So in front of my eyes, I see a reality. So there's a concept of the outer guru, and then I close my eyes and I'm not an object to myself, rather a subject, and I wonder in my subjective reality, what is their guru? And the interaction I've had with reality is that, at what way should I be perceiving the moment that I can trust it? So this is why I'm saying, like, your own honesty and decency is a better guide than any sort of, you know, fancy language, you know. Anyways, whoever you are, thanks for listening. And I guess comment below, share, subscribe, comment, you know, do all that you can, you know. And in the comment section, I would say the viewers can, to make this interactive, just respond to the questions, the subtitle and the main title. So whoever you are, what do you think? Where's the future taking us? And whoever you are, where's everything going? So comment below, and thanks for listening. Much blessings and namaste.